through a preview of this year's Limerick Club Hurling Championships, going through the Senior, Premier Intermediate and Junior Hurling Championships, which kick off tonight with the clash of South Liberties and Blackrock in the Senior Hurling Championship. But before we get into that, Matt, we suppose we'll look at the Senior Championship, which will be the main focus of today's podcast, and we'll look through the odds, right? So the PIHC as defending champions are 1-2, Patrickswell 9-2, Doon 6-1, Kilmallock 13-2, and then it moves out a nice bit. Adare are at 20s, Ahan 25s, Ballybrown 33-1, Kilmallock in their first year in the senior ranks at 40-1, Monaleen 50-1, as are South Liberties. Patrickswell are 100-1, and Blackrock are 150-1. Now, I wouldn't be ruling out Blackrock that much, but it does say something that the top four in the PIHC, Patrickswell, Doon, and Kilmallock, we touched on it beforehand, they've been in the last four semi-finals. That's been the semi-final pairing. Before we get into, I suppose, our major predictions, can you see anyone upsetting that status quo?
It's at this remove. It's very, very hard to see. I suppose cases can be made possibly for a trio that might break in that. Adare, Ahan, and Ballybrown, and they are next in the betting odds. I wouldn't necessarily have them in that order. I would have thought that the odds for Ballybrown are very, very generous. Should possibly be a bit shorter. It's very, very hard to see it, but just take the merits of the three that we're expecting to break into the top four, if you don't mind for a second, Jack.
Yeah.
Adare were very, very competitive last year in the championship. They pushed Patrickswell all the way. It was only a late flurry by Patrickswell that overtook him and beat him, and they had a very, very, very creditable draw with Doon. Now, it was a Doon team without a few key players on the night, but it was still, I saw the game, it was a very, very creditable performance on their part. And if I'm honest, I had little fears for them going into the relegation playoff. I thought that they would have got the better of a hand, but they disappointed. I think they were well beaten by a hand in the relegation, and hence are in Section B this year. As for a hand, of course, of course, they have a great tradition that goes without saying, deep-rooted tradition. They've been doing a lot of good work, nicely and quietly, at underage level, and have been contesting the closing stages of championships in the county at the different underage levels. And of course, they have two players called Morrissey, which we know what they're all about, and like a case can be made for them. Equally, I think Ballybrown. I thought Ballybrown last year. There was something about him, Jack. Like the way they came through the group stages. They just didn't come through the group stages. They stormed through. They brushed aside Blackrock and didn't brush aside Patrickswell, and then were unfortunate to come up against the PIHC. Like last year, they unleashed Colin Coughlin, who was absolutely immense in those two games, but unfortunately missed the quarterfinal against Adare, against the PIHC. If I were to pick one of the three that might break into the group, I think Ballybrown are the most likely. But having said that, they're in a very, very difficult group, Jack, and I know you're going to talk about the groups in a second.
Yeah.
I think they're best placed to do so. I can't make up my mind whether they will or they won't,
Yeah, look, it's hard to see, and I suppose it'll all depend on that first game, and they'll play either in the PIHC or Kilmallock, so they'll be straight into the firing line. But looking at the odds, and the PIHC, like you have to have them as favourites, but they will be without Peter Casey, for the whole year, and they could also be without Mike Casey for the year, and they've obviously no Shane Dowling anymore. Like, they're not as strong as before. Now they've brought a couple of players in. Emmett McAvoy will obviously be thereabouts this year. Will Hen has come in and taken over the free taking mantle, but a lot of responsibility fell on Peter Casey's shoulders when Shane Dowling went off with injury. Now he's gone. There is probably a gap there in the forwards that the likes of, I suppose, Conor Boylan and even Kevin Downs are going to have to really step up.
Yeah, and David Dempsey, there'll be a lot resting on David Dempsey's shoulders. Yeah, but we saw what David Dempsey did last year. For me, was he possibly the most standout performer in the Limerick Championship last year?
Oh, definitely, he was.
Yeah, David Dempsey lit up the Limerick Championship last year, and he's quite capable of doing it again. And these guys in the PIHC, like they will, when the need is greatest, Jack, they're able to stand up to it. And like you'll see the like of William O'Donoghue really, leading from the front again, and that sort of thing. And if you go through the names like that, they have some, they have a number of players there that would be on other county teams, Jack.
Yeah.
Let's face it, and make no mistake about that. Like, you look at the like of Thomas Grimes, and you look at the like of Ronan Lynch and all these guys, like, it's not serious hurlers. And of course, we talk about David Dempsey, and we talk about Conor Boylan in the forwards. What about Adrian Breen? Very rarely, very, very rarely fails to turn it on never fails to turn it on against the PIHC. For the PIHC.
Yeah. And at the other end, Jerome Boylan as well in the corner.
Jerome Boylan, like, so, like they're down two, and they're down Shane Dowling, but it's still a very, very, very formidable PIHC side.
Yeah, and they're rightly favourite. 6 titles in 10 or 11 years.
Argue with it for 1 minute, Jack. I wouldn't argue it. But I take your point that they don't look as potent and as forcible as the force that they were in previous years. But I will not discount the fact that they will step up to the plate, and you cannot ignore the fact either, Jack, that they were beaten in the County Intermediate Championship final last year after extra time. That will give you an idea of what's coming through or what's coming after these guys.
Yeah, the production line is there, and I suppose one key for
don't forget Carl King either.
Yeah, but one thing that stands out for me for an appear, I suppose 2 things really, that William O'Donoghue mentioned it last year, that I suppose people in the media had written them off, and they really showed in the final. I don't have the score, but I think it was 5-27 to 114 or something like that in a county final. It was like Limerick's performance against Cork in the final, but that man William O'Donoghue is an enforcer on inter-county stage, and for me, he's been the best player in the county championship over the last 3 or 4 years. Usually in midfield, he played 1 year at centre back, and he was completely dominant. But I think William O'Donoghue is capable on his own of bringing the team all the way. I think he's that good of a midfielder, an enforcer, a leader. He's been captain now for 3 years, which is probably unheard of in the club championship campaign. And I think he could be the difference for the PIHC. But that's enough about the PIHC for now. They're going to face Kilmallock in the first round. Kilmallock are obviously very strong in their own rights. Haven't won a championship since 2014 and have been beaten by the PIHC in the majority of those years. I felt last year coming into the semi-final against Doon that they were favoured after beating the PIHC, and they'll need a similar start. If they can get that win against the PIHC in the first round, it'll be a huge start for them. But I don't think this year will be the same as last year for Kilmallock.
No, it won't. It doesn't give me any pleasure to say so, Jack. A number of the great stalwarts that they've had for many, many years are a year older. Graham Mulcahy picked up a knock in the All-Ireland final. and maybe doubtful for Saturday evening. Paddy O'Loughlin is taking a year out. With the two of those out, if the two of those are out, it certainly leaves very, very, very big gaps to fill in Kilmallock. They still have a cohort of players, of course, that have won All-Ireland medals this year. Like you've Barry Hennessy, you've Aaron Costello, you've Robbie Handley, and of course you've a 2018 All-Ireland medal winner there in Oisin O'Reilly. Now Barry Hennessy has been around for a long, long time. What a wonderful servant Barry has been to both club and county. But Aaron Costello's, Robbie Handley's, and the Oisin O'Reillys of this world, Kilmallock would look to them to be the new crop of leaders coming up on their team. Now, the Kevin O'Donnell's, the Gavin O'Mahony's, the Mark and Philip O'Loughlin's, the Paddy O'Brien's, who have served Kilmallock so well for so long, are still around. But as I said, there's an extra notch now gone up in terms of years. And but you can expect Kilmallock to be formidable, to be very, very, very formidable. I'm tipping, before you ask me, I'm tipping the PIHC just to share this one, Jack. I know Kilmallock won it last year. And, to a certain degree, the rivalry that has evolved between these two clubs over the years has been fantastic. And it has certainly made our job very, very difficult to call what is likely to transpire when they come up against each other. But I'm going for the PIHC just to shade this one. But Kilmallock will give a good account of themselves. And like Micheál Houlihan will be the son of Mike, will be possibly the free taker. A lot will rest on his shoulders to step up to the plate. And it'll be very interesting to see what the composition of the Kilmallock team will be, how they will adjust to the loss of Paddy O'Loughlin was a huge figure. And if they have to adjust to the loss of Graham Mulcahy, like we just love if Mikey Casey, and we know Peter Casey won't make it, but we would love it if Mikey Casey and just Graham Mulcahy would be able to play and embellish what is one of the top ties of the championship.
Yeah, it really is. For me, I'm going tipping the PIHC, and I'm tipping them by 5, and I think Kilmallock will get goals. I think like Oisin O'Reilly and Micheál Houlihan go for goals, but if you took I think Peter Casey and Mike Casey is a lesser loss for the PIHC than Paddy O'Loughlin and Graham Mulcahy are for Kilmallock. Not saying which pair is better or worse, but I just think they're a bigger loss to their own team. That's why I go by 5 for the PIHC. But if you had to put a number on it, Matt, points wise,
I had the same thing in mind, Jack. You stolen my clothing.
I'll bump up to 6, Matt. I think the PIHC will probably have revenge in their mind for last year as well, and I think that'll be an added bonus. Yeah. But
I think you're right there, because I think that the PIHC will be going all out right from the start, because there may be slight fear, and certainly there'll be more than a slight respect there for Ballybrown coming down the tracks.
Yeah, and moving on, that's a nice segue into Ballybrown. They're going to await the losers this time. I think Kilmallock is probably the target for Ballybrown. Now, they gave the PIHC an awful lot of it last year in a quarter-final without Colin Coughlin, but like Colin has a year of senior hurling under his belt. The likes of Aidan O'Connor has played another year with the 20s. Like they've a good, strong squad in Ballybrown. Now, I don't think they're quite there. They won 2 Premier Minors in a row. Them lads are coming through, but they're still quite young, only 19, 20 years of age. But I do think there's an upset in Ballybrown, and I think it could come as early as round 2 against Kilmallock.
Possibly. And if you don't mind, we'll defer talking about that next week. To be sure we're sure that is the pairing. But yeah, there's an awful lot I like about Ballybrown, but that I share your worry completely on that one. That is it too soon for him? I think if you're talking about the progression of the back-to-back Premier Minor winning teams, and we'll be talking about the same thing about Garrisblan shortly. I think that it is probably that little bit too soon for him.
Yeah, but Ballybrown are definitely a rising force and will get better, and it'll just be really interesting to see them in their first year in Section A. But we'll be talking more in depth about Ballybrown next week because they'll definitely have a game now. Knowing me and you, Matt,
it's best to sum up Ballybrown by not saying will they, but when will they?
Yeah, exactly. And I think, judging by what we've predicted so far this year, Kilmallock will probably win, and it'll probably be in a PIHC versus Ballybrown next week. But that's for next week. That game is Saturday evening in the Gaelic grounds. I'll just get the fixtures up here for the first round fixtures. At 7:30. Then the following day, Patrickswell versus Doon at 2:00 in the Gaelic grounds. And between them two games, I think you have 19 of John Kiley's panel. But I think Patrickswell versus Doon is the tie of the round. I know Kilmallock and the PIHC probably have more recent history, but I think Patrickswell Doon always delivers, and they've met in a couple of semi-finals and split those. Patrickswell obviously have won 2 championships in the last 5 years, 16 and 19, and Doon are still looking for a first. But I think Doon are a team to watch this year. I would go as far as say I think Doon will win the championship. Now we'll get into overall predictions later on in the podcast, but I don't think Darragh Dunham has ever played better. Rich English is back, firing on all cylinders. Barry Murphy, by all accounts, was flying in training. He came on in the All-Ireland final. They've Josh Ryan. Adam English is in his first year in the senior championship, and you don't want to put much pressure on Adam English. But for those that haven't seen Adam English play, make it your business to watch Patrickswell and Doon. And even for Patrickswell, the likes of Josh Constantine, the Jason Gallans of this world before you get into Keane Lynch, Dermot Burns, Aaron Gallan, the names are off the tongue, Matt.
They have, Jack, and the only certainty about Doon and Patrickswell is the uncertainty of predicting the result. It has been that way for the last couple of years. But I think your analysis is pretty bang on there on Doon. If we speak about Doon for a moment, who are going for their first title, Tony Ward has done an excellent job in his time in Galway, particularly with Galway Camogie, and he's beefed up his backroom team now with the addition of Jimmy Quilty this year, which is Jimmy Quilty knows a thing or two about winning championships, not only championships at club level but at inter-county level, having been involved with John Kiley in 2015 and again in 2018. So you're right, and you listed off the names there, and Adam English is worth the admission money any day, but you didn't name them all there now, because you forgot Owen and Cathal McNamara. You forgot Pat Ryan. You forgot Cormac Ryan. You forgot Jack Ryan. You forgot Chris Thomas.
I forgot Thomas Hayes as well. There's 15 inter-county standard players there.
They have, and if they get it together, they could make a serious bolt for the championship this year. Now, like Ballylanders, I'm just wondering, will there be a hangover from last year's county final?
Yeah.
Not just losing the county final, but the manner in which it was lost. They ran into the PIHC at their very, very, very best, at their optimum best. And the PIHC's performance on that particular night was one for the ages.
Yeah.
If they can park that, move on, and I suppose with a new voice behind the scenes in Jimmy Quilty, that will help that transition to move on. Would you turn to Patrickswell? Patrickswell, do not lead the Limerick Roll of Honour by accident. They have done it. They're doing it for a reason. And you must remember, Patrickswell have been Limerick County champions 20 times. Ahan have been Limerick County champions 19 times. Ahan's success in the competition is dating all the way back to the 30s, when they were absolutely dominating the situation. Patrickswell's success in the competition, they have won 20 championships, Jack. And this is an absolute fact. They've been Limerick senior champions 20 times in the last 56 years.
That's a good strike rate.
Their breakthrough year was in 1965. Crossmedlin match that if you can. You know, that has been a phenomenal level of success, a phenomenal level of consistency. And throw into the mix there, was it between, there was 13 years without a title, between 2003 and 2016. So you can see that they're phenomenal. And like, mention Patrickswell in any corner of this country. Avon Gillan, Dermot Burns, Keane Lynch will immediately loom large. You know, they've made such an imprint on the inter-county hurling stage. Throw in Jason Gillan as well. Throw in a whole raft of players like Shawnee O'Brien, Kevin O'Brien, Thomas O'Brien, Jack Kelleher, Brian Murray, Mark Carmen. The names roll off, Jack.
This is why I said this is my standout tie, just the names on show. And I think for any club, like, to have 3 All-Stars at any given year, the Patrickswell have at the moment in Keane, Aaron and Dermot, and like more than likely they'll all get All-Stars again this year. But we touch on him every single week. But Keane Lynch is the best hurler in the country. Like, Patrickswell have the best hurler in the country. But I still fancy Doon for some reason. I think just as a squad, they're just that bit better. And I think they'll have a plan for Keane Lynch. And the likes of Adare Donovan and Rich English will know him better than inter-county teams do from training with him. But, like, it could go either way, Matt.
Yeah, and I forgot to mention Josh Considine. There's another name. You can. Keane Lynch is the best hurler of all time, Jack. That's my view on Keane Lynch. You know, and I make no apology for saying it. If there was better, I couldn't imagine it. And we had this discussion in the context of looking back on the All Ireland final, and I said, move over Ring and move over Mackey. This is the best hurler of all time, and that couldn't have been better, Jack. I couldn't contemplate it anyway. You're right. You're right. Darrow Donovan and Richie English will probably know him better than most people. But there's an awful lot of people around the country for the last 4 or 5 years knew how to map Keane Lynch until it came to it. You know, Cork thought they had the measure of him until he ruled the roost in Croke Park. You know, and they're huge names. But Jack, and I think you're the same. I'm leaning for Doon by 3 points at this one.
3. I'm saying Doon by a point, and it's probably a bad omen that we're both going for Doon, because it'll probably be a Patrickswell win. But we won't talk too much. But the losers, as always, will play the third team, which is Ahan. Like, a word on Ahan, like, they probably were very heavy underdogs going into that game against Adare last year, and won fairly comprehensively in the end. And when you have Dan Morrissey at one end of the field and Tom Morrissey at the other end of the field, you always have a chance.
You have match winners. That's what you have.
Yeah.
You know.
So
you always have, and they have some other good players around them that they're not totally dependent on those. And I know we'll be talking in greater depth about them next week. And you know, they have a lot of players like Padraig Hartnett now had a very good game in the Munster final at full back for the on the Munster under 21,
20s.
25, and like you have a lot of players that have represented their county at underage level, and they're coming through. And of course, I'm a great respecter of tradition, because I feel some people say tradition counts for nothing. It does, Jack, in tight situations. But I think we should leave that until next week, when we know who Ahan are playing, and we'll be better equipped to analyse it and have a look at it.
Yeah, and as we said beforehand, the start of the Han are one of the teams that we feel could possibly break the stranglehold on the championship. So we'll know more next week once we've seen them play. But that's Section A. The top two teams in Section A will go through to the top team into semi-final. The second team will play the top team in Section B, and we move on to Section B. And the start of the championship tonight: South Liberties versus Blackrock. Blackrock, it's their second year in the championship. They did well, I suppose, in their first year. Last year they got a draw against Gary's Plan, first memorable tie for them. Or did they get the win? I'm not sure. But Liberties are probably favoured for this game, just with the fact that they have an all-star now in Barry Nash, they have Brian Ryan, and I suppose a lot will depend on where Barry plays. I'd imagine he'll probably be in the forwards.
Well, I met some South Liberties connections on the day of the All-Ireland final in Croke Park, and I think the influence of Barry Nash is going to be huge, as will be the influence of Brian Ryan and his brother Tomas. Well, we shouldn't for 1 minute underestimate the impact and the influence that former Cork goalkeeper Anthony Nash will make this year. I honestly think this guy's going to be a huge plus for Liberties. It certainly will give him that vital extra dimension. They qualified for the quarterfinals last year. They were beaten by Doon. They put up a decent enough performance against Doon. And I think it speaks a lot for South Liberties, the fact that they had such a desperate. They had a season from hell the year before, when they were relegated without winning a game, and that they bounced back now. Albeit it was a very, very tight group, in that themselves, Monaleen and Maru all in 2 points, and they got through on scoring difference. But I think they showed enough to me in this quarterfinal against Doon anyway, that they were there on merit. And like Barry Nash is going to be a huge player, but the big question when South Liberties are going out, you wonder where Barry's going to be playing. But you can be sure that wherever he's playing, that he's going to have a huge influence. And then there is Brian Nash as well, and Conor McSweeney. So they're Anthony Nash is going to be a big plus. Like you have an all-star goalkeeper, and renowned for his puck out, and dare I say, renowned for his close-in frees and penalties. So this guy is Anthony Nash is bringing a lot to the table with South Liberties. Plus, I understand that he's doing a bit of coaching there. So I'm going for Liberties against my neighbours on this one, because I think Blackrock, to a certain degree, struggled last year. They were unlucky in the first round, in that they ran into a Ballybrown tsunami. Ballybrown at their best, and it was the day in which Ballybrown unleashed Colin Coughlin on the unsuspecting Limerick public, as it were. And did he get 3 or 4 points from half-back, plus having been absolutely the standout performer on the day? You were with me there, Jack, as far as I remember, and we were tongue-tied at his performance on that particular day. For a young kid, only 19 years of age, 18 years of age.
I think he was 18 at the time. Yeah, he's only 19 now.
So and then of course Now, they got a very morale-boosting result in the second round when they drew with Garryspillane. Now, you might say what was special about drawing with Garryspillane, but for Blackrock, it was special because for a number of years now, Garryspillane have been Blackrock's bogey team, really bogey team. And they got a draw, and that draw was enough to edge out to ensure that they preserve senior status, because as big a win as Ballybrown had over Blackrock, they had a bigger win still over Garryspillane, which meant that it sent Garryspillane on the relegation route. I like Blackrock. Now they have a couple of new players coming through, but the fear I have for Blackrock is that they haven't enough of them, and I still think that they're too reliant on many of the players that won, great players all. Now, may I say that won the All Ireland Club Championship over a decade ago. Like, they will be still looking to the Richie McCarthy's, the Maloney's, Simon Hennessy, to lead the charge. Now, in Paddy Leahy, they have an excellent forward and an excellent free taker. Kevin Palmer knows a thing or two about finding the post, and of course they have the very, very, very talented Jimmy Quilty coming through. Like, yeah. We saw what Jimmy Quilty brought to the table when he was appointed captain of the Limerick under-20 team, and the leadership that he provided down in Cork in the Munster final, and indeed in the Munster semi-final against Clare. So he's a bright. You've Colm O'Keefe as well, who's a forward that is coming through now. Marty Farrell has been around for 2 or 3 years, and they will obviously look, to maybe Dylan Dawson capturing some of the form that made him such an exciting player a number of years ago. But they won't like me for saying so in Kilfinnan and Patrick. But unfortunately, my head tells me that South Liberties are going to win this one, Jack.
By how many?
About 5 points. 5.
Okay. I was going to go against you, regardless of what you said, but I have a feeling for Blackrock. I have to say I was hugely, and you mentioned him, hugely impressed by Jimmy Quilty in the Munster Championship, the under-20s. I thought he's an excellent player, and I'd love to see him in the forwards for his club. I think Blackrock will be grand in the fence. And I think even if Jimmy Quilty goes into the forwards, Barry Nash is going to have to take him. That could take out Barry out of the game. But I just feel like Blackrock, their second year at the grade, there's an upset in them. So I'm going to go up Blackrock by 2 points. So one of us will be wrong, because we go similar at the times, probably because we're similarly misguided. But I'm going to say Blackrock by 2 points. But that game is on tonight. Let me just get the fixture for you. First game of the championship on tonight in the Gaelic Grounds at 7:30. For anyone that can make it, I would recommend getting out to see a bit of hurling, and obviously we'll have 2 of our All-Ireland heroes playing that day. And then tomorrow night, Friday night.
Don't forget that our former All-Star Richie McCarthy is another one of my. I omitted to mention him. And there you have him. And you have
stars in every team.
You've also Dahi Heffernan.
Yes, another player is very impressive.
Very exciting player, but I agree with you totally on Jimmy Quilty. I think Jimmy Quilty is a huge prospect. What amazes me about the guy is that he doesn't have a settling in period in a game. He's the one guy that's up to the pace of the game from the throw-in. Now, I know we've playing mainly at midfield, but I think he's a very, very talented player.
Yeah, talented enough player. We'll see who comes out right in that regard. And then obviously Friday night lights, Adare, Monaleen, 7:30 in the Gaelic Grounds. Look, we spoke at depth about Adare at the start of this, and I'm going to say Adare by 5 points. Can you see Monaleen causing the upset?
I can't, Jack. I cannot. I cannot. I think Adare will have learned their lesson from last year, and I think they will have this carefully planned. They will have it carefully planned for this year, and like there's no room for error here in this particular game for either side. In that, waiting down the tracks in 6 or 7 days' time for the losers of this game are Kildimo Palace Kenry, which is not a very, very palatable prospect. And I mean that in the best possible sense. Like, they're not a palatable prospect because they are likely to be very good. And that's why, and they're likely to have momentum with them. And they're not a team that just came up overnight. They lost the final before they won a final. They lost the final to Blackrock after a replay. So, like, since they beat my own club, Glenroe, in 2017 in the intermediate championship, like they have shown how they could adapt to the intermediate, to the premier level, at the higher level. And I might be subject to correction in this, Jack, and you can check the records. Since they came up to Premier Intermediate, have they only lost one group game?
They lost 2 group games. They lost to Mungers.
2 group games.
Their first year and last year.
But prior to that, they had only lost 1 group game.
Yeah, I was at 14.
Yeah, that is phenomenal consistency, Jack, by any standard. So, Adare and Monaleen, you know, the prize will be not just 2 championship points, but will be to avoid having to face Kildimo Palace Kenry, because if they adapt to the senior level and make the type of transition to senior that they made from intermediate to Premier Intermediate, then they're going to be formidable. And then there is a certain Mr. Kyle Hayes inside in the middle of it all who they will have to cope with. So I'm going for Adare on this one. Like, you know, when you look at Adare, you know, need you look beyond Declan Hannon, you know, Declan Hannon, what he'll bring to the table. You look at Ronan Connolly, you look at Brendan O'Connor, but above all, you look at the scoring machine that's Willie Griffin.
Yeah, like that's what stands out for me for their scoring prowess. Like Mark Connolly added into that. John Fitzgibbon is well capable of scoring. Like it'll be interesting to see where they play Declan Hannon, because he's usually plays in the forwards for there, but I think they have the firepower to actually play him at centre back, where I think he can dictate a game more than at centre forward.
Yeah, but where do they play Ronan Connolly then, who they played at centre back last year?
I'd like to see Ronan not at centre back. I think maybe centre back he's probably tied down to position. I saw him at wing back 2 years ago against, I think it was South Liberties back in Bruff, and he was class. He was your prototype Limerick halfback, up and down the field scoring points, or even midfield scoring. But in the same token, then, like, and we've not really spoke about Monaleen, like they have firepower. Donncha Daldig obviously was with the 20s this year. Marco Dwyer, like, is an excellent forward. Andrew Touche Cosgrave plays in the forward stream. If he can catch fire, like, he's an excellent player. Larkin Lyons can get a score from midfield. Like, it won't be as straightforward as probably as we're making it out to be, but you'd still have to fancy there.
Yeah, I do. I fancy there, and Ronan Lyons will probably want to be eligible this year. Who's an excellent defender. Yeah, I'm like, I don't think Monaleen really set the world on fire since they have been promoted.
No, it's fair to say that, right?
Yeah, it's fair to say that, but they have been, you know, they've hung in there. They've like they have never threatened to set the world on fire, but they've never looked like relegation material either. You know,
that's true. That's true.
They've looked comfortable enough, but with this truncated version of the championship this year, you know, a lot of bets go out the window, Jack. They will be seeing the scenario that we're seeing, I would imagine. and the importance of getting that win over there. I simply don't think that they'll be good enough to get it. And Ronan Connolly, like I remember Ronan Connolly's performance against Cork in the under-20 championship in Cork a couple of years ago, midfield, and an evening when Limerick were well beaten, and I thought he was the best player on the field. He was absolutely outstanding. So maybe midfield might be his best position. I don't know, but wherever he plays, anyway, he's a huge asset in my view. Michael Keane is another young player that maybe coming on the Adare team this year. So I'm sticking to my guns, Jack. I'm sticking to Adare.
And again, by how many points?
5.
5 points. I said 5 as well, but I'm going to change mine to 6 because I think they actually have the power to overwhelm a team. And I suppose before we finish, in the South Liberties Blackrock group,
today, Jack.
I know. You're on your holidays.
You hear me?
You're very magnanimous. I know.
You're bowing to age.
I'm bowing to a fella on holidays. It's just be remiss of us not to mention Gary Spillane. I know they're only playing next week, but they obviously face the losers of Liberties and Blackrock, and we mentioned obviously the similarities of Ballybrown with the double minor team coming through. Like Gary Spillane, you will be hopeful will have a say this year after probably failing to deliver the last 2 seasons.
Yeah, I think you will see a different Gary Spillane this year. Those we were talking about the Kilmallock players maybe being that year older at the wrong end of the spectrum. I think we talk about the Gary Spillane players being that year older at the right end of the spectrum, because you're looking at the nucleus of the side that won the 2017 and 2018 Premier Minor Championships, which was a phenomenal achievement, given the pool of players that they have to choose from. Because Gary Spillane, I know it takes in Knocklang and it takes in Galway, but it's a very, very rural area, and they wouldn't have the same peak as others. But it was a huge leap of faith on their part to promote themselves to Premier, and then to go on and win it back to back was absolutely phenomenal. But the men that were responsible for that particular success, James O'Keefe and Davy Ryan, the 2 main spearheads of that sport, they are now in charge of the senior team in Gary Spillane, and so they're coming along with him, and you've the like of James Ryan, who's going to, we know what he brings to the table, and the phenomenal success or the phenomenal experience that he brings. Likewise, people like Garrod Power, and I'm slow to say that Donny Ryan has retired, because every time I say, he tells me he's retired, he immediately goes and proves me wrong. So I let that one up in the air if you don't mind, Jack. But you have Mark Quinlan now. I know Mark was suffering some kind of some injury problems in the latter stages and the lead up to the All-Ireland final. I think it would be very, very important for Gary Spillane that Mark Quinlan would be available. You've Dylan O'Shea, who's an absolutely phenomenal scoring machine, both from play and from frees. And you've the like of Ryan Tobin, you've the like of Onsi Sheehan, Brian Heavey, Roberto Donovan. I honestly feel that Gary Spillane, this is the year that I think that they can make an imprint in the championship, and certainly I don't think either South Liberties or Blackrock will relish meeting them in the loser stage, because they are going to be quite formidable, Jack. And I know we'll be talking about the bouncers next week, and we probably will have a greater fix on the availability or otherwise of Mark Quinlan. But I think Mark would be a very, very important player for them.
Yeah, we'll touch on all those games next week. Those are the Senior Hurling Championship games, and we're probably running behind schedule a small bit. I do want to look at the Premier Intermediate Championship. If we have time, we'll look at the Intermediate and Junior A, but just in the Premier Intermediate Championship as a whole, and I will look for predictions on this as well, just to test you. But Munger St. Paul's versus Maru Boher is probably the standout fixture. Last year's finalists versus last year's team that got relegated, I suppose. Mungers will be looking to follow in the example of Kildare Palace Kenry, who lost the final and then won a final.
They will, and you know, I'm going for Munger St. Paul's on this because coming into last year, Maru Boher had lost Seamus Hickey, who had moved to Croke Kilfenny, and now they've lost their real talisman in Shawnee Tobin. It's very, very hard to contemplate a Maru Boher team without Shawnee Tobin, and his input and the imprint that he has left on the championship in recent years. Like he's one of those guys he's the real talisman, the real go-to man, and you know, for that reason I'm going with Mungers.
Yeah, I said Munger by 5. You're saying Munger by
6.
By 6. You're giving me that one. And I before we get into it, I'd have Munger as my favourites to win it, just simply on the basis that they can follow in Kildare Palace Kenry's lead, and they've been thereabouts for the last few years. And I think a win against Maru Boher will go a long way in solidifying that as the favourites. Then you have in the other game in that group, Knockany versus Cappamore. These sides met in a relegation final, I think, a few years back, or a game to determine who will go into relegation final. I'm going for Knockany by a point, but like two very even sides.
I'm going for Knockany by 4 on this, and my logic on it is that the man at the helm in Knockany this year is the man with the Midas touch. Peter Finn. Like he has been successful wherever he's gone. Effin, Drummond at Lacka, Kilmallock, Charleville, wherever he has gone, success has followed. He has this knack of getting the best out of players, and of course he has a very, very strong family connection with Knockany, in that his mother Joan was from Knockany. So like in that sense, it's a match made in heaven. But I'm going for Knockany, and I think there'll be a Peter Finn bounce in that one.
And out of those 4 teams, Munger St. Paul's, Maru Boher, Knockany, Cappamore, which 2 do you think will advance to the semi-finals?
I'm going for Munger St. Paul's anyway.
Yeah.
I think Knockany.
Okay. I fancy Munger St. Paul's, and to be honest, I think it's a toss-up then with the other 3 teams. I think Munger will win all their games, and I suppose it'd just be who can get the bounce on any given day. I suppose moving into Group 2 then, Bruff versus Glenroe. Again, close to your heart. And a game that, like, I find it very hard to separate the sides. They were both beaten in the semi. Sorry?
Can I pass on it?
No, if we weren't doing the predictions, man, I'd let you pass, but I know you're going to have to go for it. But like this game has all the makings of a draw, really. Like, we're looking at it.
Jackie, are you sitting down?
I'm kneeling down. I can't sit at the moment. My back, to be honest.
I'm going for Bruff on this one by a narrow margin of 3 points.
Bruff, checkest.
Yeah.
I don't know. I have Glenroe by a point. I just think, and we mentioned it a few times.
From a point of view, I hope you're right.
Yeah, I think we've mentioned a few times, like the effect that a loss can have. I thought Bruff were well beaten by Kildare Palace Kenry, whereas Glenroe were very, very close to beating Munger St. Paul's. I think they can build on that, and Bruff will have to regroup, but Bruff have Sean Finn. So
Bruff have Sean Finn, and on the sideline they have Jerry O'Connor this year.
Yeah.
who formerly Cork All-Ireland winner with Newtown Chandram, who is member of the Garda Síochána and Bruff. So he's taken charge of the Bruff team this year, and certainly will be a new voice in the background. Plus the fact that Glenroe are going to be without Jimmy Barry Murphy, who has been one of the mainstays and permanent fixtures on the team for God knows as many years as I can remember now, and who's going to be a huge loss. And they are the two reasons mainly that's conditioning my thinking in it. I would, if I had a real wish for this weekend, it would be that I'd be wrong in this prediction. But and that's no disrespect to Bruff. I have fantastic time for Bruff and fantastic friends there. But lads, I want Glenroe to win. And but if you ask me to predict, and if I'm honest, I think Bruff are going to win it by about 3 points. And like you're going to have a Sean Finn factor, because for a number of years, like I think last year, despite the poor performance by Bruff in the semi-final against Kildime of Pallaskenry, that Sean Finn was making a huge impact for Bruff last year, and I think you will see. But of course, you see, Jack, that there's a slightly different dynamic in the whole championships this year, in that you were having the championships last year before you were having the inter-county. Now it's the other way around. So it's all systems go now for the club championship between now and Mike Reardon was telling me during the week that it's hope to have them all done and dusted by the end of October. So I shocked you there, Jack, but if you can get over the shock, we'll move on to the next match.
Yeah, you will never get me going against Ballysteen or Askeaton, regardless who we're playing, but that's beside the points. But hopefully I'm right anyway. I'd rather be right, and sure, look, if I'm right,
pragmatism rather than delusion. That's what they say.
Yeah, see, I'm very deluded then on the other side of it. So, but look, either way, if Glenroe win, I'll be happy and you'll be happy. So, hoping for a Glenroe win. But look, it'll be a good game anyway. And then Newcastle West versus Drummond Athlacka, Newcastle's first game in the Premier Intermediate ranks. Drummond Athlacka probably have been building for the last few years. Probably unlucky not to get to a semi-final last year. But like I have it down, I've just written down here a draw, because again, like the Premier Intermediate Championship is so even. Like realistically, like there's always one or two teams, and this year it seems to be probably Mungret are probably a small bit ahead of the rest. But like on any given day, any of these teams will beat each other, and that's why I have a draw here: Newcastle West and Drummond Athlacka.
No, I'm going for Newcastle West in this one, Jack.
Newcastle.
And I'll tell you why. Briefly, I'll tell you why. Drummond Athlacka last year, they lost their 3 games in the group stages, and they survived in the championship by virtue of a relegation playoff victory over Brewery. Now they do have David Reedy, which is a huge player. Now they are going through a certain element of transition at the moment. Now Andrew O'Shaughnessy has come in there, and I have no doubt he will be looking to put his stamp on it. But you're looking at a Newcastle West team, and we spoke a while ago about Kildime, Pallaskenry losing one and winning one. Put Newcastle West in the same boat. They lost the 2019 final to Glenroe. They came back and they won the 2020 final against a very, very strong PIHC side. And for that reason, I think it's just not 1 year momentum that's going with Newcastle West. Plus, Jack, they have an awful lot of very, very good young players in Newcastle West. Now, the only thing is that there is a certain element of a crossover between hurling and football. But Newcastle West, and of course, indeed, all clubs, the way the championships have been structured this year, which is excellent to see, are able to park the football for 3 weeks while they're concentrating on hurling. And I'm going for Newcastle West to win this one by 3 points.
By 3. I'm going for a draw on that one. And then I suppose I asked you for Group 1, so I asked you for Group 2. Bruff, Glenroe, Newcastle West, Drummond Athlacka. Who's your 2 to go through?
I think Bruff and Glenroe.
Yeah. Newcastle won't sneak in there in their first year.
Glenroe are a bogey team for Newcastle West.
That'll be that.
I can't remember losing to Newcastle West, but there's always a first time. But I remember 2 major victories over them: the county junior final in 2000 and the county intermediate final in 2019.
You'll be hoping for more of the same this year.
Yeah, big games. Glenroe have won them. You have probably nailed the crucial game of that section.
And if you had to pick an overall winner of the Premier Intermediate Hurling Championship this year,
I think it's between Mungret and Bruff.
I think Glenroe at the final. To be honest with you, Matt, you'll be glad to hear that, and you hope that come true. But I think it's Mungret's year to lose. I think they've been thereabouts now for 3 or 4 years, and I know from talking to the boys like that's their goal. Like, it has been the goal the whole time, but like they're desperate to get up to the senior ranks again, and I think they will this year. That's Premier Intermediate Championship. Intermediate Championship, I can't get the groups up here for you, Matt. There's something wrong with the laptop, so I'll just call out the teams, and I'll get you just to pick maybe 1 or 2 that you fancy, and maybe even a winner. So in Group 1, you have Brewery, Tournafulla, Granite Ballingarry. Group 2 is Croom, Palace Green, Hospital Herberstown. Group 3, Fiona, Crokilfinney, who are obviously promoted, Adare, and Group 4, Na Piarsaigh, Effin, Kilmallock. Obviously, Na Piarsaigh got to a final last year. You'd imagine they'd be thereabouts. Obviously, the loss of Peter Casey and Mike Casey from the senior squad will probably mean that team loses a couple of players. But for me, like, I saw Fiona play a few years ago in the Premier Intermediate Championship. They were thereabouts, and like Seamus Flanagan was exceptional for Limerick. I would be looking towards Fiona and Na Piarsaigh personally.
Yeah, I would, and I would agree with you totally actually about Fiona. But if I were to give a shout out for a third team, it would be Crokilfinney.
Yeah, they were excellent last year in the junior championship.
They were excellent, and not just in winning the championship, but I just thought that the configuration of their team and personnel that they had on board, I thought that they were such that would be suitable to make the transition to a higher level.
Yeah, look, the layout of these championships, like I know we talked in depth about the senior and the Premier Intermediate, but like these championships, the intermediate and junior championships, you kind of need to see some games to really get a close look at them. And in the Junior A Hurling Championship, like there's obviously standout teams like the Castletown, Ballybrown, Kilteely, like Patrickswell were in the final last year. My vote will obviously go towards the Skeeton. Hopefully a tough group with like Patrickswell, Mungret, Doon, Feeney Kilmeady in it. But I'm gonna give a vote to my own Skeeton to come out of Junior A. But if you were to go for a team to win the Junior A, Matt, who would it be?
Castletown, Ballygran.
Yeah, I thought Castletown last year would win the championship, but then again, you've the likes of Crocora, who have Cathal O'Neill, who could win a championship on his own. But yeah, you're like, look, as we said,
Todd was with him 2 years ago. He's back on board this year. You know, I'm going for Castletown, Ballygran.
Yeah, look, if I wasn't going for my own team, I would be hedging towards Castle Ballygran, because I thought they were unlucky against Kilmallock in 2019. I suppose they probably kind of got caught in the hop last year. And I suppose finally, Matt, I never actually asked you about the Senior Hurling Championship, but if you had to pick a team to win it, and I'm gonna give mine, I think Doon. Like, I just have a feeling for Doon. Now I'll probably be proved drastically wrong. They mightn't even get out of the group stages, but I think, like, not even Adam English. Adam English is a huge bonus, but I think Barry Murphy having him back in with the county setup, Rich English is back fully fit. There's players we haven't mentioned: Dinny Maloney, Eddie Stokes, like, weren't mentioned at all. I think they have 15 real quality players from the bench. I think it could be Doon's year. But for you,
yeah, I still go with Na Piarsaigh, I think, but I definitely would have a shout out for Doon. I think Doon will be there or thereabouts. they get to the final this year, if it is against the PIHC, it will not be a repeat of last year. It will be only a notional repeat, because I think it could be a very, very close game. I find it very hard to disagree with you about Doon. I think, Jack Adare has to come. And it may come, but I have a sense that the PIHC's experience of being there and what they have done, that they might just do it again now. Could give a shout out maybe for Kilmallock to come as dark horses. Tony Considine at the helm, Patrickswell, which we know who, and it looks to be between those four. But if there's to be a surprise, I agree with you. It could be Doon.
Yeah, look, how can you rule out a team that have the best hurler of all time in many people's eyes, yours included? But yeah, I'm going to give a hesitant guess towards Doon, and I'd like to see a new team win it, and hopefully, and no disrespect to the top four teams, hopefully we can have a couple of new teams in the semi-final, because it's good for Limerick hurling. Limerick hurling is on a high, obviously. Like, it's been an incredible journey for the inter-county team, and hopefully the club championship can live up to that. Hopefully there'll be some streaming along the lines, but again, we always say it: get out and support your local clubs. There's a link in the website to get tickets. Only a tenner. Like, what else would you be doing on a Thursday, Friday, Saturday, or Sunday evening or afternoon? But we'll leave it at that. So, Matt, we have our predictions for the year. We have our predictions for this weekend. You're leading at the moment, 13-12. That's from 3 rounds of Senior Football Championship. Hopefully, we have a good few here that are different. Hopefully, I can get back into the lead. But I must say that, lads, Matt is on his holidays. He's taking time out of his holidays to talk to us. So really appreciate it, Matt. Enjoy the rest of your stay, and hopefully you can get to a few games the weekend, and we'll be in touch soon.
Thanks, Jack. Talk to you.
No, he was still automatics, like. Here we have this beautiful car. You have a chance of winning at www.winakuga.ie for €20, and your support is much appreciated. Thank you. Yeah. No, Dave, you just lie across the planet, you know. Yeah, will you? Top on or off? Pitch up the shorts a bit, you know. You're right, pal. You can. It's a nice car for you to win now. You'll be lovely. Super Grady. Oh, I take it. Accuracy is a bit. It's off, is it? Yeah.
Your hips going that way and your face this way.
Oh, you see them. You see them. Oh my good God. They do up though, it'll be fun.